Iowa is slated to start fall camp tomorrow, July 30th. David Eichel, Elliot Clough, Sean Bach for HawkeyeInsider.com. Elliot and I are fresh off Big Ten Media Days, and I'm still pretty exhausted from back-to-back trips to Nashville and Vegas for work, but I'm hanging in there. Things are going to start to ramp up. And Sean, you feeling pretty well rested? Because you just got back what? You went to Michigan?
Yeah, no, I mean, as well rested as he could be. So I feel great. I feel great. I'm ready for the season to start, honestly. Just because now it kind of feels like we're just waiting, and we're kind of in like that period of time where obviously there's fall camp coming up, but it really just feels like there's been like nothing the past week, which honestly isn't the worst thing, but still, it's like it's getting to that point where it's like, all right, like let's find some consistency with stuff going on and enough of these kind of dead periods.
Dude does not take a day off. How long were you in Michigan?
No, I did take some days off, but there was just stuff where I was like, I'm so bored, like I just need to do something.
I guess
so
that.
I just did it. It didn't take long. It wasn't like debilitating by any means. And the weather wasn't like that great. What's up?
I was gonna say, we're not wired like that, right, Dave?
Dude, I mean, Elliot and I were sitting next to each other. We see you post something, and we're just like, I just remember looking at him like, why the hell doesn't he just take a break?
Well, I mean, there was just like nothing going on. Like I was just like, it was raining. Like we were just sitting in the house like for a couple of the days because it wasn't like the beach. Like it wasn't nice weather for the beach, and like my family does not go to the beach unless it's like super sunny outside. Like I don't think I've ever been to the beach once where it's like cloudy. And it was like rainy and cloudy, and like we just weren't doing anything. And I was like, you know what? Frick it, I'm just gonna get something up.
Frick it.
I was so close to saying. Oh man. But yeah, no, I'm happy to be back, and I kind of had some FOMO missing out on Vegas, but it seemed like it was a pretty good time, pretty productive time for you guys.
That was the equivalent of was A Christmas Story when it just goes fudge, only I didn't say fudge.
Yeah, no, that was, I don't know why I thought it'd be a good idea for me to say that right there, but
it's okay.
Whatever. Hopefully YouTube doesn't get pissed.
It'll be good. Elliot's Wi-Fi is lagging out again, so Sean, we'll just start ripping it from the start. So I think what we're gonna do is a position by position breakdown of just kind of where we see things going into fall camp, position battles, and just kind of do a little bit more of an extended primer because I know you and Elliot really kind of carried that load on the site from that standpoint because I was in the midst of moving and all this other stuff. So, Sean, I hate to be basic. We should probably start from the top, right? The quarterback room. I thought Kirk Ferentz had a lot of interesting things to say about it just from Big Ten Media Days when he talked about how the top three quarterbacks weren't even on the roster last year. So that tells me, Jackson Stratton is going to be in that fourth spot. They did add Hetlinski. They did add, Hank Brown. Then obviously they got Mark Gronowski, but it's going to start with Mark Gronowski from the top. And I know some Twitter people have said, well, is it Gronowski the guarantee starter? Like, absolutely, he's the guarantee starter. So I guess what are your overall thoughts about the quarterback room outside of the fact that it's unquestionably better and it's unquestionably deeper than they've had, probably in the last 4 years or so, at least?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, hearing those words about Gronowski, obviously he hasn't been able to really break the huddle yet or, do anything super, extensive or super, kind of like, okay, like telling of what he can be, but just everything that, people are kind of saying behind the scenes. And I know it kind of sounds, to some people, it might sound familiar with some of that, Cade McNamara talk and obviously what he, was able to do before, or, not really do before the season started with his injury and, kind of how he was limited. With Gronowski, it just feels like, things are really starting to come together for him and really starting to piece these things well together and, kind of just being, what we kind of expected him to be and what the Iowa staff expected him to be. And, it's going to be really fast. I mean, we kind of always knew he had the humility side to him and, that leadership side. But I think that's something that, maybe was taken for granted because it really didn't feel like there was a true leader in that quarterback room the last couple of years. And, I think with Gronowski there, like he's kind of set the tone in that way. And he's kind of, I thought it was interesting when KF said that he didn't really try to come in and, be the alpha. Like he just tried to come in and just be one of the guys. And eventually, that turned into him being one of the leaders in the room. And, I think that was really telling of just kind of the person he is and, kind of the leader that he is. And, now it's time to really put that on the field. And, obviously all the stuff that we've kind of heard in skills and drills and, that sort of thing with the 7-on-7 stuff that they've been doing, obviously not able to go in full pads, but, all that has just been really, really positive talk. And, I don't know if you can like you have to be reasonable in what you can expect from him, because obviously it's still Iowa. And it's like, until you see that, like, what's the word I want to say? Like, until you see that, next step in that passing game and, that this passing game is potential to, do what it can do with Tim Lester. Like, obviously you're not going to expect like a Brad Banks, breakout season or anything like that. But, if you can have a season like similar to Nate Stanley, like that's a really good year. Like, especially maybe that 2017 or, 2019 years like that, or maybe it's 2018, that's a pretty good year to have. And can he get to that level? Who knows? But obviously there's, different, it's not all stats at the end of the day. And, it's more so completion rate and just like, not turning the football over. And I think, if Gronowski can do that at a high level and, continue to lead and continue to ascend this passing game, like it's going to be really successful.
So I don't know. I didn't get all of that. Obviously, Wi-Fi struggles here, and that's the beauty of recording a podcast when nobody's in the same spot. But yeah, I mean, everything that I heard is everything that we've talked about and heard behind the scenes too. And that Gronowski, I think honestly, like it may have helped him the way he came in. Obviously you would prefer to have had him healthy, but it may have helped him having come in and been on the sideline, been able to ingratiate himself with his teammates, been able to sit back and learn and let Sully and Hank Brown run the offense while he's sitting back, maybe talking to Jimmy Sullivan, building relationships, right? Like, so
yeah,
without a doubt, QB1, without a doubt. Like there is no part of me that thinks Hank Brown is going to walk out as the day one starter, or Jeremy Hecklinski or Jackson Stratton. Like, and KF said it as much. Like when he says, what did he say? Like, I anticipate Mark will be our starter. Mark's the starter. Like,
yes,
that's what that means. But I think Hank Brown is QB2. I think Hecklinski or Stratton are QB3. The way that was really interesting to me, and something I'm going to write about a little bit here today, is that Kirk made it sound like Hecklinski is almost automatically QB3.
yeah.
So I don't know if Stratton, like what we saw in the spring game, KF said that it was Stratton's like on one of his best showings. So maybe the spring just was rough for Jackson Stratton, and that means he just assumes that Hecklinski is going to be up top, thanks to what Warren Ruggiero has said. But I don't think the conversation goes past that. Like, we're not going to be talking about Jimmy Sullivan or Ryan Fitzgerald for probably a few years. So that's the majority of what I wanted to get at there with quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think Mark Gronowski's done everything right. I mean, like Sean said, I don't think the leadership and humility is surprising, but I also think it's worth noting just how much that the coaches and the teammates have brought it up unpromptly, right? And I think you look at Gronowski, he's the right guy at the right time. And I think he sees a lot of potential with the offense. And obviously, I think a big reason he chose Iowa is he wouldn't have to relearn a whole new system because they ran a similar system at South Dakota State. But he's a guy who can be explosive. I think if you can get Iowa to be in the top 75, even top 80 passing game, I think you're going to have a hell of an easier time recruiting wide receivers in the portal next year, tight ends in the portal, quarterback if you want to go back in the portal again, because we don't know what the turnover rate's going to be like just because this is the era that we're living in. So, I'm looking forward to seeing Gronowski on August 9th. That's when Iowa announced their Kids Day, and we'll really kind of be able to see what he brings to the table. But I want to flip over the running back. The running backs can be a really interesting spot. I think Omar Young's done a really good job early on. Seems like he's built a lot of genuine connections. The more I hear behind the scenes, guys, about Kamari Moulton, the more I'm starting to buy stock. I still don't know if he's at the weight I would like him at, or if you expect him to be in every down between the tackles back, but he's put on a significant amount of weight since he got to Iowa. He's really worked on his breakaway speed. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he showcased what he could do at different times last year. But again, does he have that breakaway speed if he can get to the outside? That's kind of my big question mark. And then I'm really curious to see Jazz Patterson, because Jazz Patterson is a guy that does not lack confidence whatsoever. He has done a lot of speed training in the offseason. If he breaks one tackle and he waits, maybe 0.2 seconds longer for some of these blocks to develop, maybe he can go have a couple big breakout plays. Then kind of that dark horse to me, guys, is TJ Washington. We've heard so much behind the scenes about what he can do, whether it be from a receiver standpoint, running back standpoint. He's kind of a true Swiss Army knife. And I kind of hesitate when I say that, because it feels like we've said that about a couple other wide receivers who really haven't done too much over the last few years. But this is a guy who I think there's too much noise not to at least buy stock that he could potentially do something. So I'm curious what the running games could look like. They have a veteran offensive line, and I'm curious about Omar Young's approach to the season. But again, you don't need Kamari Moulton to be Caleb Johnson. You just need two guys that are capable of really just being productive backs to at least set up the pass.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't was the big takeaway from media days that they were kind of like still iffy about who 1, 2, and 3 is at the running back position, or did they say that at all? Or am I
don't think we really talked too much about running backs, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, at all. I don't remember running backs coming up. I don't remember running backs coming up once.
Or tight end.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I was thinking of something else. I don't know. Maybe maybe I did get away a little bit, so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation again, because you have a guy like Kamari Moulton, who I think a lot of people were, obviously very iffy on when Iowa recruited him, being like, okay, this is going to be the guy that you get in this class. Like, and it was the same thing with Nathan McNeil in the last class, like Liddell Betts being able to find some of these gems, and same thing with Jazz Patterson, because at the time he committed to Iowa, the only committable offers he had were Iowa and Marshall, even with all those offers that he had before. So this is going to be one of those years where, I don't want to pat myself on the back, and I'm not going to be one of those guys who fully admits that I was like, okay, Caleb Johnson is going to have the year that he's capable of. But I think, I think if you saw the potential more so with Caleb Johnson.
Yes.
Being the number one back and having that, campaign than you do with Kamari Moulton, Jazz Patterson, or TJ Washington. I think that's, if anyone that just saw like what he did in some of the, runs he was capable of having in previous seasons, you kind of just saw that potential there. Like, maybe hindsight's 2020, but it was there. And with this running back room, it's just like, I don't know who I really see. I don't really know if there's any of them that can be at that level. And that's, like you said, Dave, that's totally okay. That's totally okay. But you have to be productive in, 1, 2, and 3, because, if you have one guy that's, not doing what he needs to do, not putting up the yards that he needs to in the yards per carry, that's going to be trouble. And I like, what TJ Washington brings. I think he's a really fascinating third running back, especially with his ability, kind of make plays out of the, with his hands, and, being able to, be a receiver. I think that's something that, Iowa really hasn't had in the last couple of years at that position. I think is going to be a, maybe even like a guy like, I know Iowa fans, obviously there's some cold blood there now, but like an Akram Wadley type, obviously maybe not as shifty, but, he's a guy that if you get the ball in the open field and you allow him to, screen passes, maybe even put him in the slot, he can be dangerous in the open field because he's got some shift to him. And I think that's a really, interesting piece for this Iowa offense, and just kind of, adds to that receiver room and to the passing game as a whole. If you can have that, not even really a check down option, but a guy who can, make plays out of the backfield as a, receiver, that's a really valuable piece. And, obviously with Jazz, I think this is kind of his make or break year in a way. We've been talking about him for a long time, it feels like. And obviously injuries have bothered him. Caleb Johnson's emergence was one that, he obviously didn't get the shine that maybe people were expecting last year. But yeah, I mean, just with him, it's like, can he be that consistent, reliable back and, get 5, 6 yards or 3, 4 yards when need be, not run for those negative yardage. And, take care of the football too. I think that's a really important thing as well. So yeah, I mean, you like the pieces that are there, and especially if Iowa feels like can go with like 5 or 6 guys, like that would be awesome. But it's probably going to be those 3 guys that are going to carry much of the load. And Kirk Ferentz has said it so many times before too that the Iowa offense really relies on the run game, and if you have a good run game, you're going to be successful. And that's honestly the key for this year. Yes, we talk about the passing game, but the run game is going to be so critical. Like it's going to be so important for this offense to, find consistent running backs and guys, who can get those 4, 5, 6 yards, because Caleb was obviously a home run candidate, but, these other guys are still, capable of, kind of being more that traditional, like getting those, like I said, 3, 4, 5, 6 yards instead of getting those negative yardage and negative plays as a whole.
But Kamari, we saw the home run play against Maryland, one.
Yep, sure.
And I think that we mentioned breakaway speed there too, Dave. As I watched a replay of that the other day, and I thought, damn, Kamari's faster than I thought he was going to be, or faster than I thought he was. So there's that of note. Additionally, TJ Washington has some home run capability to him, especially in the passing game, like you mentioned too, Sean. So I think that's there. I don't know that the home run capability is from Jazz so much, because what do you think of Iowa State, that run, right? He didn't finish it, but that is something that he's working on, and he did mention it to us this summer. So it starts and ends with those top 3 guys, right? That's the running back conversation right now. But you cannot forget those 3 young guys, Nathan McNeil, Xavier Williams, Brevin Dahl. Like, you cannot have this conversation without mentioning them, because there are ways that they see the field this season, whether it's as a running back, whether it's on punt return, kick return, but something. Like, I would be kind of surprised if, maybe, I don't know that all of them see the field this year, particularly Nathan McNeil, if you want to preserve his red shirt. But I see avenues for all 3 of those young guys to see the field too. Like you both said, you don't have to have a Caleb Johnson type year again. That's just unrealistic. It was a record-breaking year. But if you're 6 running backs, if you're 3 running backs collectively can come together and be super productive in the run game, that's going to change your offense. That's going to make things a lot easier on Mark Gronowski. That's going to make things a lot easier on Tim Lester in terms of play calling.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be one of the more intriguing things. And honestly, you want to take as much pressure off Mark Gronowski as you can, right? Because now he feels all the pressure of elevating Iowa's passing game, and he should. I mean, he's a guy who's won a lot of football games. He's achieved the highest level of FCS since transitioning to a Big Ten, but you cannot put all the pressure on him immediately. And that's why this Iowa State game is going to be so critical when we talk about, can Iowa go on the road and steal a win again in Ames? They haven't lost in Ames since 2011, but this is not the same Iowa State program that it was for the last few years. There's high expectations for them. I think people in Ames expect them to contend for a Big 12 title, and that means a college football playoff spot. So it'll be a good early test for them.
I'm going to say one more thing. If you look at South Dakota State's stats, obviously they've played more games, being that they were in the FCS playoffs. Every year that Gronowski has been the starter, the Jackrabbits have had a 1,000-yard rusher. Plus, I think it's like over 1,200 yards, but also they've had a couple of guys that have ran for, 700 yards. So, yes, like obviously you're going to rely on Gronowski to, make those plays in the passing game and, be capable of using his arm. But, he's at his best with that strong running game. Like, that's going to be a really important thing. It's not just going to be that he's going to carry this thing. Like, they've had some pretty good running backs at South Dakota State during his tenure. So you're going to need
They had some dudes back there. Can attest. Saw it with my own eyes. Isaiah Davis was nasty back in the day. Super difficult to tackle. Like, Gronowski had a wealth of weapons at South Dakota State.
Yeah. So, I mean, like that's going to be, I mean, one of you guys mentioned it, like that's going to be critical. Like, we talk about, I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, like Gronowski's just going to absolutely carry this offense, like, with his arm. That's not going to happen. Like,
that's not going to be successful in the Kirk Ferentz system. If you have a quarterback carry you with the arm, it's just not realistic.
He didn't do that at South Dakota State either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't let the stats fool you.
Yeah, it was very complimentary. And that's going
Right,
to be
right.
that's going to be really critical this year. And I mean, let's talk. Yeah, let's go into the wide receiver room too, because obviously I was gonna about to go there, but
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the most intriguing room, I think, on this roster, maybe outside linebacker to me, just because there are so many different guys. And, again, we need to see production translate, but now they have a quarterback that can make throws at all three levels. But this is probably the most depth that Iowa's wide receiver room has had in some time in terms of you can play different guys and guys have seen the field, right? Now, there's no all Big Ten caliber guy on the roster. From my own eyes right now, shocker, that's what I see it. They haven't had an all Big Ten wide receiver since 2011. That was Marvin McNutt. Emir Smith-Marset was a returner. That's when he made the all Big Ten team, is that. But right now, I mean, guys, what do you see? 7, 8 different wide receivers that you could easily make an argument to see the field. I mean, Reese Vanderzee is obviously going to be a very popular name. Sam Phillips. We're talking about Jacob Gill, Jarriett Bowie, Dayton Howard, KJ Parker. Who am I missing? Thank you, Elliot, for holding up the counter for me.
Caden Weetjen, Seth Anderson.
Caden Weetjen, Seth Anderson. And there's Elliot. I think Elliot's mic just went on mute, but so it's kind of funny that you can sit here and just count.
Maybe Terrence Smith, 8.5, maybe. I don't know that he's necessarily playable year one. Sean didn't include him in the 5 freshmen to watch in that article that you just put out. Sorry if that was VIP. That my bad. But
it doesn't matter.
Okay, 8.5. I don't necessarily see Terrence Smith being super playable right away. I think he's got to refine some of those things. He's got some decent ball skills, but you've got that skill set with Dayton Howard, with Jarriett Bowie, with Reese Vanderzee, so you don't really need it. But probably 8 playable guys, because you just go down the line and you can see how each of these guys factor into the game, right?
And they've played for the most part outside KJ Parker. These guys have seen the field. Dayton Howard had a touchdown last year. Reese Vanderzee stole the show in week 1 because he had 2 touchdown catches, and of course, injuries, and I think going up against Big Ten physical outside, corners, but now he's put on some more muscle. Now he's 100% healthy. It would be very easy to predict a breakout, quote unquote, year for him. Jacob Gill was tremendous, I thought, last season with what he was able to bring to the table, especially catching the football over the middle. He got popped over and over and over again. He held on the ball. Sam Phillips had 0 drops on 60 plus targets at Chattanooga last year. He's a guy on the shorter end, but he's a home run threat. But now, this is where I'm really intrigued about the wide receiver room. Last year, it was about establishing a foundation for the offense as a whole, right? We're talking a ton of pre-snap motion. We're talking about confusing the defense. We're talking about doing different things. And I thought Lester did a phenomenal job with that. But now, how much do they build upon the foundation? Do they continue to put in more, different schemes? They continue to put in different route trees? Are they going to take more shots downfield? Are they willing to play 5 or 6 or 7 different wide receivers, or are they going to really just try to tier them out and only play certain guys in other situations? But we talk, obviously, Iowa needs to run the football to be successful. But how are they going to run the football better, guys? Sideline to sideline, getting the ball the outside, spacing out the defense, because I don't think Caleb Johnson necessarily got as much love as he should have from the national media last year from this standpoint. Ashton Genty was the best running back in the country last year. I know I went back and forth on that, but with what he was able to do, there really wasn't not an argument, right? But Caleb Johnson ran against so many 8-man boxes, and he continued to just be incredibly productive. The defenses knew that Iowa was giving the ball to Caleb Johnson, and credit Iowa's offensive line. I mean, I thought they took a significant step forward. I know we'll get to them in a minute, but that's how Iowa's going to be successful. Sideline to sideline. Guys not dropping passes. And ultimately, I think Mark Gronowski has to find a way to put 1 or 2 wide receivers to memory in terms of, hey, I trust this guy. If I go throw a 50-50 ball, I'm going to put my wide receiver in a position to make a play, because quite frankly, I think that's been missing over the past few years. How many times have you seen an Iowa quarterback throw a 50-50 ball and the quarterback truly believed the wide receiver was coming down with it? It's certainly been a while from that standpoint to me.
I think of twice, and they were both Reese Vanderzee.
Yep.
Illinois State, Michigan State.
Yep. The touchdown catch.
Yep.
Which I thought that was kind of a bailout one. It was a hell of a play by Vanderzee to be able to snag that, though. When he kind of grabbed it over the receiver's, like the DB's head, or just kind of yanked it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as this position group goes, like you talked about it, Dave, like there's probably hasn't been this much encouragement or this much excitement since those 2019 to 2019 for sure. With like Brandon Smith, Amir Smith, Marset, Tyrone Tracy, those guys. And, that was mainly like 3 or 4 guys that, a lot of people are, and even Nico Reganey in that group too. But like, this is one of those, groups where it's like, okay, yeah, like how do you really like manage it? Because there are a lot of, guys that you could potentially get on the field. Like Jerry Bowie, I thought, is one of those guys that I'm probably higher on than a lot more people. And like he showed a lot of flashes last year, I felt like in games. I think he had a couple nice catches in the Music City Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. Or like he got reps in one of the games. I can't remember exactly which
Maryland.
one. Maybe it was Maryland. Yeah, it could have been Maryland.
It was towards the end of the season, if anything.
Yeah, for sure. And his athletic pedigree and just some of the things that he's done from a testing standpoint too. Like, he's a really good athlete, and he's a really good pass catcher too. And I think there are some things that he needed to refine once he got to Iowa. But he's a really dangerous weapon too out there. And, I think a lot of people aren't talking about him enough. And then Dayton Howard as well. Like, that size that he has is elite. But obviously he's not as well put together maybe from a, wide receiver standpoint as a guy like Reese Vanderzee.
Yeah.
But, those are 2 guys. And then obviously KJ Parker potentially playing the slot with Sam Phillips. Like, how do they kind of manage that? And, I think John Budmeyer said in his conversation with Chad Leistiko that it took some time for Phillips, and it's taken some time for Phillips to kind of grasp things because, he's a new guy in the block. Like, it's not going to come, as quickly as maybe, a lot of people would like. And, how does that kind of work into stuff? And, being able to create separation, be able to figure out that timing, because that's so key in Tim Lester's offense is, figuring out that timing with your quarterback because, in the Big Ten, you got like 2 or 3 seconds, most plays to really figure out what you're going to do with the football. And, it may seem like a lot, a time for people who are watching from afar, but when you're really back there in the pocket, you're out there wide receiver trying to create separation, there's really no time.
Or a quarterback when you have a 350-pound 3-tech in your face.
350 pounds.
Well, I mean, yeah. I was thinking. I was thinking the big nose tackle from Wisconsin from a couple of years ago, who ended up in Vita Vea.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying.
That's a scary, scary sight.
Yeah. No, but and I like how these guys like complement each other too. Like I think their skill sets really complement each other well, and how you can kind of scheme them up in different routes. Whether that be short, intermediate, deep, like however you really want to do it. Because it felt like a couple of years ago, like there was just size, like that was about it. Like you had Brandon Smith, Brody Brecht, or no, it was I can't remember who exactly it was. Like there was always either speed or size. Like there really wasn't a good happy medium. Yeah, and I think now there's a good happy medium with this receiver core and kind of how they can work off each other well. And you have a guy who knows how to do that, and Tim Lester too, who's had success with both types of receivers.
Yeah.
So your guy here to make sure people don't forget about is Jerry Bowie. And to me, the guy to not forget about is Caden Weigent. I think he was severely underutilized, especially when the offense couldn't do jack squat 2 years ago. I remember them doing an end around against Utah State and being like, oh, damn, Caden Weigent should be probably part of this offense this season. And I think that was like one of maybe 3 touches he got. Yeah. And they were all end arounds or jet sweeps or whatever. And he got the ball entirely too much. That play against Ohio State when Cade just straight up underthrew him. Like, I don't see Mark Gronowski doing that. Mark Gronowski has a stronger arm, or even Hank Brown. Like, if anything, Hank Brown's going to overthrow that, So Weigent is my guy that I feel like we can't forget about. I know you mentioned TJ Washington potentially playing the slot, but like the breadth of talent in the wide receiver group and the depth, which is just crazy. That's the antithesis of Iowa football, right? At least in recent memory. I'd be shocked if TJ Washington plays anything other than, I guess maybe in a 5 wide kind of situation where he's in the backfield and they split him out, whatever.
They used to do that with Tyler Goodson too.
Yes, exactly.
When he was there.
So I would say those top 3 are maybe not solidified. Top 2 are probably solidified in Jacob Gill and Reese Vanderzee, but 3 through 8 could be incredibly fluid. Between all of those names, like I could see a situation where Dayton Howard's the guy. I could see a situation where Jarriett Bowie is a go-to receiver. I could see a situation where Caden Weegan, now that he's in year two, and with that speed, and becomes more of a route technician, and it's like, oh damn, got to get the ball to him in the open field. So lots of different ways that wide receiver group can go. It's not as running back, though fluid, is not anywhere near as fluid as the wide receiver room could be this season.
Let me play a little bit of contrarian here real quick. Are we only complimenting the depth because the lack of a pure top end talent, or do we really believe that there are 7 to 8 different guys? Because again, they've all played, and I'm not trying to downplay them, but do you see what I mean? If they have 2 or 3 go-to guys, I don't think we're really talking about the depth as much.
I mean, I feel like people kind of thought the top 2 or 3 is going to be Jacob Gill, Reese Vanderzee, and I think a lot of people hope for Sam Phillips, but I think that number 3 spot might be a little open right now.
So I think your point is valid, Dave. At the same time, there is just so much fluidity there, and there are so many different ways that can come to fruition. But I do think that is valid, because if they had Marvick McNutt and Darrell Johnson, DJK, I don't know that we'd be talking about Dayton Howard right now, but that's the status of Iowa football. It just is.
Okay. No, I just thought about that, and I'm like, look, we get name recognition, we get all this. And by the way, I just realized we're 32 minutes in this. We might need to split offense and defense into 2 pods, because we've just been kind of
That's fine with me.
Yeah,
that's fine with me.
Especially when we talk about the offensive line, because we know this has arguably the biggest position battle on the team right now, and probably one of the most critical things, and that's the left tackle, right? George Barnett, I've been a huge fan of his from the start. I mean, I know it took him a few years. I think people have realized, he came into a really bad situation from the standpoint of he was forced to play guys that, with all due respect, and Barnett to admit it, had no business playing that early. Kirk Ferentz has said the same thing, right? But now you're talking about, you get Logan Jones, who's, I would say, a top 3 center in the country. You get Jennings Dunker, who has potential 1st to 2nd round NFL draft pick next season. You get him at right tackle. You have Bo Stevens coming back for another year. They have pieces to be one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten. But how much of that hinges on this left tackle spot? I still lean Trevor Lauk right now, but there are 3 different people that are really going to be battling it out. So, Elliot, I'll let you start, because I know you just wrote a story on this from Big Ten Media Days. So I'll give you the floor on this.
I would say the main thing at the moment, one of the main things that stood out from that story and from a conversation that I basically had one-on-one with Logan Jones at Big Ten Media Days, is Cannon Leonard is supposedly in the mix of that competition too. Do I think he starts game 1 against Albany? I don't, but that has to be, at least a storyline in this storyline itself, right? Because there are so many different ways this can go, and it feels like that's a recurring theme with this offense between all these position groups, right? But like I said, I don't think it's Cannon Leonard. Like you said, Dave, you lean Lauk. I probably do too, at least game 1. And it could change throughout the season. Maybe Bryce George, it clicks. And, okay, he's our guy. Or Jack Dotzler, however it goes. Jack Dotzler might start game 1. We really don't know. And I don't think people in the building know either. It's such a toss-up between all 4 guys, and we're going to see how that transpires throughout fall camp. Of course, we'll have all that intel at Hawkeye Insider. You're not going to get that anywhere else. But in that competition, I do lean Lauk, because he has that he's that 4-star pedigree, right? Had offers from Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, all these programs. I don't know if those were committable, Sean. That was before my time. But Lots of really high-profile programs involved. I don't know if they saw him as a guard either. That's definitely a possibility. But I think he's the guy. I think he's the guy because of potential. I think he's the guy because of the fact that he's been with the program long enough and gotten reps enough to earn that trust and earn that spot. I think it's just a better option than Jack Doetzler. I think it's a better option than Bryce George. To me, it's Lauk, and you run with Lauk until he tells you, or he proves that, or somebody else proves that they deserve that spot. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, my thing with Doetzler is he was one of the first guys that George Barnett offered when he got the offensive line job a couple of years ago in that 2022 class, and he was recruiting him pretty hard when he was at Tulane. And Doetzler's been in the program longer than Lauk. Like, obviously, it's a year difference. Like, so what? But that makes a difference. Like, that does make a really big difference. And I think Doetzler, like, I don't know what the ceiling is with him. Like, I think the floor is decent, but like, I think you're kind of gonna get what you get. And I think, if you get some consistency, I don't know if you're gonna get overall dominance, but that's what you need is like some consistency at that left tackle position because it's such an important position on the offensive line. I mean, the most important position, at that in center, considering that you're protecting a guy like Mark Gronowski too, and you need him to stay healthy. But yeah, I mean, I lean Lauk, but it's also, I was thinking about this the other day. It's one of those position battles where you don't really know what it's going to be until the first day or the first game of the year, season opener. And it's like, it wouldn't surprise me whoever they throw out there, but I don't know if it's gonna be Bryce George. Like, I think it would probably be Lauk and Doetzler. And I've also talked myself into, Bryce George maybe being that swing tackle like Nick DeYoung was last year, kind of that next man in, as being that guy that can play, if one of the guards goes down, like he can come in and, step up. Obviously, he has experience playing on the interior. If Jennings Dunker's injury, like obviously Jennings is clear, but if that injury, kind of bothers him throughout the year and he needs to take drives off, you throw Bryce George in at right tackle. I think you would probably prefer that right now over Cannon Leonard from an outsider's perspective. So I think that's going to be where Bryce George is most valuable right off the bat, is kind of being that, swing tackle type. You need to throw in, him for a couple of snaps in place of Jennings Dunker if his injury, continues to bother him a little bit. That's obviously an option. But left tackle, like I think I think the ceiling with Lauk is higher in terms of like what he can do and his ability. But Doetzler just being in the program longer, like he might just have a better grasp of that. Because I know they were pretty neck and neck throughout spring ball. And I don't know, obviously if that's a good thing or that's a bad thing that, it didn't seem like neither was going to really separate themselves.
I mean, this is why I have you mentioned why I have Lauk as being the guy. I think his ceiling's higher based on what I've heard behind the scenes and what I've seen. Now, does that mean he's going to be the safer option right away? No, but I also think when you're going up against a team like Albany, you probably want to play the guy with higher ceiling to at least get him some in-game reps. But with that being said, the competition level completely ramps up when you go up against Iowa State. As we already mentioned earlier, what Iowa State believes that they can achieve. But, I mean, Iowa and George Barnett, I think they have a really solid room. I'm very interested to see how they look on August 9th. But, again, it sets Iowa's offense up for potential here. And before we get to tight end, Sean, Elliot and I talked about this in our Big Ten Media Days podcast, and I wanted to throw this out to you because one of the – I don't want to say big storylines, but one of the minor things is Kirk did not opt to put out a depth chart this summer, so we're not going to find out till game week. My tinfoil hat theory was there are so many open positions where Kirk did not want to put it in the heads of any players, families, or anyone that any spot has been locked down so that everybody can really just kind of go full on nose to the grindstone, earn the starting spot or earn their spot on the two deep, and they feel like they got a fair shot at it. Because, again, you think about how many different spots are on the defense, think about left tackle. I don't think it's that crazy of a tinfoil hat theory, but, I mean, have you really given any thought to why there isn't a depth chart? I don't think it's a big deal personally, but it's just out of the norm.
I mean, Obviously, Kirk mentioned that it was parents. He didn't like parents yelling at him, which I thought was pretty funny. And honestly, like, could actually be part of it. I think a lot of it has to do with question marks too. That's for sure. Because I think, we got the one in the spring and we were kind of like, oh, like that, this. And obviously, like, that's what you do when you get depth charts.
Yes.
Like, even the ones that we get, like, during the regular season, like, we make those assumptions. So yeah, I just think, I think you're onto something in terms of he doesn't want people being like, okay, this is like locked in, like this is where it's at, because there are a lot of more question marks at each position than, we were kind of anticipate, or generally, like, there are more question marks than there have been in years past at various positions. I think that's a valuable point because but also Kirk is like, these depth charts don't mean anything. So, I don't know. Like, he's probably just playing mind games with us. That's why. But
the only thing Kirk hates more than doing Big Ten media days in Las Vegas is all the preconceived notions due to depth charts.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we don't need to talk about right guard at all, do we? Like, that's Cade Pieper.
Yeah, it's Pieper.
Yeah, it's Pieper.
I think Bryce George could be a good fit there. Like, in an ideal world, you bring in Bryce George to play right guard as opposed to left tackle. Having played right tackle at the D2 level, that D2, like he's a Big Ten player, right? That's what they brought him in for. You feel a lot better about left tackle if you got that big guy from Rice, right? I don't even remember his name now, but I think he went to Ohio State or picked Ohio State out of the portal.
Yeah,
but I think we're all on the Cade Pieper boat. I think
he deserves to play.
That hay bale toss got us all locked in. So, but in all seriousness, a lot of similarities with Logan Jones. Athletic, strong, could be the center of the future after this coming year. We'll see. But I might have missed you guys mention him while my Wi-Fi was sucking. But I figured we should at least mention Cade Pieper's name.
No, for sure. So let's flip over the last position on the offense, and we probably should have known we were going to go over time. Let's just be real, knowing us. But this is where this might be a bigger question mark to me than left tackle, guys. And I'm not talking about like who's going to get the reps. I'm talking about what the actual upside is of the tight end room, because I think Aston Estranga's flashed. We've seen Zach Ortworth have some massive plays down the field, more than, multiple of them. I think he's capable of it. But how much of this offense is going to be based around the tight ends too? Is it going to look like, I don't think we're going to have a 500-yard tight end here, right? I really don't. But if you can get, three different guys with 300-plus yards and a few touchdowns and a couple red zone targets, you're probably in a good spot. I think Ortworth's probably a guy that I'm going to buy stock into this upcoming season. I know Sean loved Aston Estranga coming out of high school, and he's shown flashes. Luke Lachey, Eric, all have both, everybody that has played alongside Estranga has been very, very complimentary of him. But again, that other part too is who's going to be that third tight end, and I think that's going to be something I'm at least going to keep a little bit of an eye on. But again, I need to see what the upside is with this tight end room, because we're so used to all-American, all Big Ten caliber, future NFL guys. And I do think Estranga has potential to get there. I think they have guys that have potential, obviously, to be that. But I just don't think they've shown it at a consistent enough basis for me to I'm going to go buy stock in him being an all Big Ten guy by the end of the year. But the other side of me also thinks, does Iowa really need that? I don't know.
They don't need if their wide receiver group can be as good as we think it is. Obviously, last year, I think a lot of it had to do with quarterback play. I think that's kind of what we put the blame on a lot of this stuff for the offense last year. And, and also I think, maybe it's predicated on some of the misses that they've had at the tight end position in the last couple of recruiting classes. Like, they've hit on a couple of guys, in the 2025 class, their top targets. And, that really wasn't something that they've been doing. Yes, Michael Bird and Gavin Hoffman were two top guys in that 2024 class. But, obviously Hoffman's going to Missouri now. Burt, there's potential for him, but he was a later offer. Like, he wasn't one of their earlier offers in this class. And, obviously the Thomas Fidone stuff, but that was back in 2021. Eli Raridan in 2022. that would have been a really good hit. Obviously, his injuries were, something that's bothered him. And now he's one of the top tight ends in college football. I never thought like Stringa would be like, okay, this is an NFL guy. But I think he would be a very reliable, very competent, tight end at a place like Iowa, where they've really developed guys well over the last couple of years. We might have to get like some of the A&F guys to really break down like what the big difference was with tight end, with Lester's offense in terms of like, compared to Brian's offense. I don't really know the exact ideologies and schemes with that. But, I think with this group, you have a guy in Estringa who, I think will need to improve slightly as a blocker. I think that's one area where he wasn't totally great last year, totally consistent. Ortworth, I think, is really, much more of a downfield threat than Estringa is. I think everyone kind of can agree with that. Like, Estringa is more of that check down type of guy, be physical, inline tight end, while Estringa is a guy that you can, not preferably put out wide, but a guy that, you can put in, situations to get the ball down the field. And same thing goes with DJ Minami too. Like, that's a guy that I know a lot of people are pretty excited about inside the program, but it's a matter of like, when does he really make that impact? Is that this year? Or is it kind of just like, okay, we like his upside, we like his potential, and maybe he's a year away? Is that Michael Bird in that third spot? Like, yeah, I think you brought it up, Dave. We get so used to like, okay, this guy's going to be, a number one, the first round, second round pick, in the NFL draft because he's going to play tight end at Iowa. Yes, like, that's obviously a very strong pitch that Iowa can make in recruiting circles, but, it's not the reality with every guy. And I think last year with Lachey, maybe they didn't really look to him as much, but also they didn't have a quarterback that could really go through progressions. And this year they have a guy that can do that. So, what does that mean for a guy like Addison Estringa? Maybe he's going to be more than just kind of a check down guy. Ortworth, he can be a guy that gets those catches, to move the chains 12, 13 yards, like what have you. So it's really one of those years where you're kind of like, you don't really know like what expectations to have with the tight end room. And that's really odd to think about.
One of the guys that us three specifically, but I think the media as a whole just almost, I don't know if disregard is the right word or just completely forget about, but Hayden Large has to be in the mix here. Coming from Dort, where he did play tight end and then converted to fullback, and now he's a tight end again because they're not going to really have a fullback in this offense. So he might be the third guy, probably fourth guy is what I would imagine. Fourth, fifth, maybe I would probably put it third, fourth. But there's a couple other things we have to talk about in this conversation. Addison Estringa has not been able to get through a full season healthy.
Yeah.
So how does that impact who plays, who steps up if that does happen again? Because that makes Ortworth your number one. And if there is an NFL guy in this tight end room, other than, we're not talking about the freshmen yet because we don't know what they are. I think it's Zach Ortworth. We've seen his ability to block downfield. We've seen his ability to be a pass catcher. And he's like a man of steel. I don't think he's been hurt at all, if I remember correctly. So he's a guy that's been a constant in a room that's had a lot of injuries, especially in that his freshman year in 23. Like, who the hell thought Zach Ortworth was going to play in 23? Not me. And that group has just lost so much. That's something I've kind of talked about ad nauseum. I think we all thought that Gavin Hoffman was going to be next up. Like, he's gone. All those walk-ons are gone. Gavin Leaper gone. So I would probably put DJ Vonamy in that category of being a potential breakout guy. I think that he's got a really good shot. Michael Burt does too, but I would put Vonamy, even though he was a walk-on, put him ahead of Burt. But yeah, that freshman class is really interesting. I mean, Mason Woods, it showed a lot of versatility in high school. Thomas Meyer being a super heavily recruited guy. Eli Johnson has the physical makeup almost already. So that tight end class is really interesting. But I thought going into last season that Luke Lachey was the best player on the offense. Turned out it was Caleb Johnson. I still think Lachey, with more competent quarterback play, would have gotten a lot more touches last year.
He would have been an all Big Ten caliber tight end. He had that upside. He had the skill set.
He's an NFL tight. Like, he's going to be.
That's exactly why he's going to make the roster, despite
exactly
like they were excited and ecstatic about him too. Really quick, Elliot, I did want to mention about Ortworth. Ortworth did not play organized football until his freshman year, and he missed his entire sophomore year because he broke his collarbone as a high schooler, and then I think he missed 3 games his senior year. But since he's gotten to Iowa, he's been healthy.
Okay, there you go. And I really like. I mean, it also like I think he's a pretty good interview. Like he's not super like he's not he doesn't have a lot of emotion when he talks, but he gives you solid answers. It's kind of like Fran McCaffrey in a way. But I think if there's anybody with a super high ceiling, an NFL ceiling in that room right now, it's probably Ortworth. But yeah, we'll see regarding health. We'll see regarding how the offense operates. This is an intriguing position.
So we're gonna have full coverage of everything from fall camp, behind the scenes intel. We're gonna do another podcast kind of breaking down the defense. Kids Day is set again. It's Kids Day is set for August 9th. I believe Media Day is going to be August 8th. So we're going to be full boots on the ground, have everything there. Plenty of content. We have our roundtable coming out tomorrow, which is kind of a written version of some of the things we've talked about, but we also kind of give some bold predictions and other stuff. So again, stay locked into HawkeyeInsider.com. You can get 50% off discount for an entire year. Be sure to take advantage of that. So Dave Eichel, Elliot Clough, Sean Bach, we'll talk to you soon.